Well, good morning, everybody. Thanks for participating again in some of our Facebook Live videos. Again, we're going to try to do these once a week to try to just, give people an opportunity to ask questions, go through some of the issues that we care about, and just, be available to voters to actually ask some questions. So I think the segment we're focusing on today is, how to help our small businesses. And this one might be pretty brief. I just want to be very direct and then invite you guys to ask some questions. Reminder, follow us on Instagram, follow us on Twitter, JDVance1, follow us on Facebook. Please share the page. It's a really important part of how we get message out to voters. So really appreciate you helping us out. But look, the basic problem here in our country is that small businesses very often get screwed relative to big businesses, relative to multinational corporations. And here, let me just give you a couple of examples. So think of Google, Apple, Amazon, Facebook, four of the most valuable and successful companies the last 10, 20 years, a ton of market power and a ton of power, of course, not just over their own businesses, but over the entire flow of information in our society. Go and look at the tax rates paid by those four companies, and then compare that to the tax rates paid by a local manufacturer in Middletown, Ohio, or Cincinnati, or Lima, or wherever else. Compare that to a local restaurant. And what you find is that our local businesses that are employing middle-class Ohio workers are very often paying a higher tax rate than some of the biggest multinational corporations in the world. How does that make any sense? Well, it doesn't make any sense. And the reason that happens is because those companies have effectively rigged the game against normal people so that they pay a lower tax rate than middle-class Ohio taxpayers and to a lot of the companies that employ them. Now, sort of zoom out a little bit further and think about this from the perspective of these companies. So say you're, I've got a particular company in mind that a friend owns and operates. Middletown manufacturer employs, let's say, 150 people. Now, those 150 people have really good jobs. They enjoy their work. They get paid a solid wage. They can support a family on that income, which is what we want, of course, is not just jobs, but jobs that allow people to support a family on a single middle-class income. Now, compare that to the Amazons, the Apples, the Googles of the world. When that Middletown manufacturer needs to hire people, they're only going to hire people locally because their business is local, their factory is local, their machinery is local, they're invested in their community in a way that a lot of these big multinational firms aren't. So if they need workers, they've got to go to the local workforce. Now, if Google needs workers or if Apple needs workers to help develop and build more of its products, they're going international. They actually, right now, Apple is explicitly relying on Chinese slave labor in Uyghur slave camps. Now, why do they get access to, why do we benefit them in the tax code when they're relying on slave labor when local manufacturers that are giving Ohioans good jobs are paying a higher tax rate? It just doesn't make any sense. And there are all these various ways in which we bias and benefit these big companies over small companies. The regulatory system is another one. Like, look, if you're a company, let's say 50,000 people, you've got an army of consultants, an army of lawyers, an army of what are called compliance people. It's very easy for you to accommodate and comply with all the regulations. In fact, a lot of the big banks love all the financial regulations because they know it pushes their competitors out of business because their smaller competitors can't keep up with that regulatory burden. I was talking with a guy, a friend of mine, a couple nights ago. We had dinner. He's an accountant who works with a lot of small businesses in Central Ohio. Mainly the suburbs and the exurbs around Columbus, a little bit in Columbus too. And the thing that he was telling me is that the crazy thing is when the tax code changes or when new regulations are put in place or old regulations are taken away, his clients are companies typically with 5 employees, maybe up to 50 employees. They're pretty small businesses, and they just do not have the manpower to comply with all this stuff, to even keep track of all the changes and to make sure they're doing the right thing. Of course, our businesses, they want to follow the law, but when the law changes so quickly and there's so much additional information you have to deal with, and you've only got 5 or so people to deal with it, and of course most of those people are working on the core parts of your business, it just creates a massive advantage for these big companies. Now, the last thing I'll say before I'll take a couple of questions, is that it's often the biggest companies that are also the most woke. Meaning, if you think of all the diversity, equity, inclusion stuff happening in our businesses, if you think about the fact, the businesses are basically forcing their employees to go through, anti-white critical race theory training, where they basically are taught that if you're white, you're an oppressor. If you're black or some other skin color, you're a victim. It's, of course, I think terrible for everybody to get that message. But when you do that, it's not like our 5-person companies that are forcing people to sit through these ridiculous seminars. My friend Chris Rufo has talked a lot about how you go to these big companies like Coca-Cola or Google or wherever, and they sit through these quote-unquote diversity seminars, but what there really are is just explicitly racist seminars where they teach people that you're bad if you have one skin color, you're good if you have another skin color. Terrible for morale, terrible for the basic function of our country, any sense of solidarity or national purpose when everybody's constantly divided against one another. But it's not our small businesses that are doing that. So in this weird way, while it's economically bad and I think unfair to give our biggest multinational corporations tax breaks that our small businesses don't get, it's in some ways, it's empowering the worst sectors of our society, because it's empowering all of these ridiculous companies that focus on dividing us apart, tearing us apart from one another, instead of making a good product, building a good business, and employing good middle-class Ohioans and other Americans in the process. So we got to stop this. We got to put more resources into our small businesses. We've got to put more fairness into our tax code. And at the end of the day, look, I'm a Republican. I know Republicans love to talk about low taxes. We've got to be honest about when we say low taxes for whom? I do not want to cut the taxes of Amazon, Facebook, Apple, and Google. Hell, I'd probably like to raise their taxes. But I want to cut taxes on middle-class Ohioans. I want to cut taxes on the small and medium-sized businesses that employ those Ohioans. I want to make the tax code work for people who are investing in this country, and I want to stop rewarding the people who are destroying this country, because that's what a lot of the biggest multinational corporations in this country are doing. Stop rewarding our enemies. Stop rewarding the people that are destroying this country. Let's start rewarding the people that are building it and making it possible for normal people to have a good life here.